playoff dreams are not dead yet.
Hey, this is Brain Chen.
Subscribe to Lock On Blues.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On Blues. I am your host of Locked On Blues, Haley Taylor Simon, talking to you all things about our St. Louis Blues here in the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today on Locked On Blues, I'm going to talk to you about the Kraken tonight. Let's get cracking. We also have some Binnington trade rumors and then the playoff dreams. Listen, I know that some of us might be defeated. I get that more than anybody, but I still believe that there is a chance for this team to make a playoff push. Now, am I wrong for thinking that? Maybe. Is it realistic? Probably not. But I feel like I need to enjoy the second half of hockey, and the only way I can do so is if I have some sort of belief in postseason hockey. So we do have a lot to get into today. I want to make sure that you subscribe here and Locked On Blues on YouTube or anywhere where you get your podcasting. I love talking Blues hockey with you all. So let's have some fun and make sure to subscribe. My everydayers know that when you subscribe to Locked On Blues, you get all the latest Blues news, Blues conversation, and so much more on this channel. So let's talk about the Blues and the Kraken tonight, because I do suspect this to be a good game. The Blues had a really good weekend with the two games that they played, despite the loss to the Winnipeg Jets in a shootout. They still got a point, and then the Blues defeated the Colorado Avalanche on Sunday. So it was a very successful weekend since the Blues made their return after the Four Nations faceoff break. And I have to give credit to where credit's due. Jordan Binnington had a great game against the Colorado Avalanche. And so did Colton Parayko, and Parayko's looked awesome. And they both played phenomenal in Four Nations. So I'm happy that they took the momentum that they had in Four Nations with them and were able to translate that here to Enterprise. But most importantly, we have the final game of the home stand. For some of you, I can understand completely how you might look at this game as, oh, it's going to be a typical Blues loss where they play really good hockey, they have this good momentum, and then it kind of slips away. And I get that, because that's what I was thinking too heading into this contest, that this seems like a trap game to me. I know we talk about trap games a lot in baseball, in football, but I feel like in hockey, trap games are a thing, and it is possible. But I just feel very confident that this team is going to do well. And I think that the thing that you have to think about too is how the defense has played. And I feel like the defense has stepped it up. As I said, Tyler Tucker, and I said this in yesterday's episode, was in the game against Winnipeg, and I thought he actually looked really good. But one of the more notable players offensively has been Robert Thomas. And we all know that Thomas is my favorite player on the Blues. I make that very well known if you didn't know that by now. And he has been carrying this team like there's no tomorrow. I think back to that game, right? I think back against the Jets. And I think, wow, we were on hat trick watch for Robert Thomas. And I understand that, maybe, no, you know what? I don't understand, because he was out for about 4 or 6-ish weeks due to that ankle injury. So while he may not be on track to have what he's accumulated in the past, you also have to keep in mind that he did miss a month's worth of hockey, a little bit more. So I'm not upset about the numbers that I'm seeing from him, which is why with Robert Thomas, I'm not necessarily looking at the numbers with him. It's more so just he's doing what he needs to do. He's getting the job done. And in my personal opinion, I think he is playing some really good hockey. And that's translating on the ice. And that's translating to you and to myself. And I feel like a lot of us here that, watch Blues hockey can obviously say that Thomas is one of the best players on this team, if not the best player on this team. But this is what Coach Montgomery said about Robert Thomas. I think he's leading us in how hard we were able to play against. His line had a huge advantage in the last 2 games of ozone possessions versus the zone possessions. That's when you really know Robbie Thomas is leading the charge. And I think that for Coach Montgomery to really address that and to see that is a good thing. I think that Robert Thomas would have been in the Four Nations faceoff. I know a lot of people have been saying, oh, well, if he was so good, why wasn't he on Team Canada? I feel like he would have been if it wasn't for him being out for that month. I feel like that's what kind of made him out of the drawing. But there's no doubt in my mind that he isn't one of the best players for a Canadian-born player in this league. He's probably one of the best centers. I just think that Robert Thomas's injury kind of made it a little bit tough to justify putting him in the tournament, right? But at the same time, I see such a bright future for him. And that's why this past weekend, I know we're talking about the Kraken tonight, but it's also important to highlight what has happened over the weekend heading into tonight's contest, because it all has, causes and reactions. And I saw a lot of positive Blues hockey over the weekend. I saw the guys killing it with the faceoffs. And Braden Shen, I believe he won like 60% of the faceoffs. It was an insane number, but I'm not surprised when it comes to Shen and some of these other guys that are excellent on the faceoff. I also saw the team play with motivation, and they were in it the whole time. There was no laziness. And I hate to say the word laziness, so maybe let me rephrase and just say more lackadaisical. But I just saw a very motivated hockey team, which is inspiring and which should make you feel a lot better, more confident when it comes to tonight's game against the Seattle Kraken. I think that, Coach Montgomery using the word relentless just really does describe how this weekend went. And he said it multiple times when he spoke to media. And that's the kind of Blues hockey that I want to see more of. I want to see the guys, fighting harder than they have in the past. Because if there's any shot for them to make it to the playoffs, they have to step it up. I know it's easier said than done. And I understand how difficult it can be to get that job done. But it is possible. And that's why with this Blues team, you can't count them out. And on Locked On Blues, I tend to be a little bit more negative than I would like to be sometimes. And it's not because I don't want the Blues in the playoffs. It's because I'm that passionate of a fan that I would really want the Blues to get a shot to go to the playoffs again and just try to, continue to grow and improve. I think they're in a difficult position. I do, because I think that the Blues are going to end up probably finishing a middle of the pack team again, like they did last season. So that is why I really need the Blues, if they're going to push for the playoffs, to actually make it happen this time. So that brings us to tonight's game against the Seattle Kraken. Like always, I'm going to tell you the lineup and give you my thoughts on that. So on that first line, obviously centering, it's Robert Thomas. To the left, it's Jakey Neighbors. And to the right, it's Bushi. That first line was incredible. Happy it's staying the same. For the second line centering, it is Captain Braden Shen. To the left, it's Dylan Holloway. And to the right, it's Jordan Kyrou. Third line is Oscar Sundquist. To the left is Matthew Joseph. And then the right is Zach Bolduc. Finally, that fourth line, it's Foxa centering with Torvichenko on the left and Nathan Walker on the right. Also, Nathan Walker, the other day after the Avalanche game, he stayed after to sign some autographs for some of the kids, and I thought that was just really sweet. Nathan Walker's a really good guy. On defense, on that first pair, it's Cam Fowler and Colton Parayko. Then we have Philip Broberg and Justin Falk, and then Ryan Suter and Nick Leddy. Suits also had a monumental game as he celebrated his 1,501th NHL game. Only 22 players have accomplished that, and 3 were American born. Finally, in net, it is Jordan Binnington. So, good lineup tonight. Not really any surprises. I will say, though, when it comes to the Kraken, I would just say right now, forward Shane Wright. He scored the only goal on Sunday's 4-1 loss to the Lightning. He has a point streak, I believe, of 3. So 2 goals, 3 assists. And I have to tell you that Seattle isn't the best team, right? But I still feel like they're a team where the Blues just have to continue their competitiveness. And the question always looms, when the Blues play these really good teams, how come they play good hockey? But yet when they're playing teams that are not as good, they tend to play mediocre hockey. And I think it's just the competitiveness, right? I think that sometimes players look at better teams that, when they just try to step it up a little bit more. But I don't know. I can't always tell you. I get confused too. It's not just you, it's me too. I don't understand it always. But we do have to talk about some Binnington trade rumors. But first, I want to talk to you about my friends over at Indeed. You just realized that your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs puts your post at the top of the page to help you reach the right candidates faster. One thing that I love so much is that it does get my ad right in the spot where candidates need to see it. And honestly, it helps me find really good quality candidates fast. And I only get applications for really strong candidates. So, Neil, you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. So there have been some rumors circulating the interwebs, and it has been about Binnington potentially being traded. My initial thought with this is I don't think this is going to happen during the trade deadline. I don't. I think that if Binnington is to be moved, it's going to be in the offseason, and I'm going to tell you why. Right now, you think about the teams that are pushing for the playoffs, that are actually in better position than the Blues. They all pretty much have strong goalies, and I don't see Binnington being a backup. You also have to factor in the value. What can you actually get out of Binnington? I think that in the offseason, 100% it would be easier for teams to move things around to make sure that the Blues get the value that they deserve from getting rid of their star goalie. But I just don't see that happening now. I understand that a lot of people were impressed with him in the Four Nations face-off, as you should be. And I've been telling you this all along, okay? But I don't think Doug Armstrong is going to allow him to be traded if he's not getting equal or more value back. And that means first round draft picks. That can mean prospects. I don't know what that entails because I don't know what Doug Armstrong might want. But I've been seeing this circulate and people have been commenting on my videos saying, "Hale, is Binnington being traded?" And I think for me, I don't want him to be traded. And I have mentioned this before. I have talked about this exact topic. I think that for him, he's a very competitive player, as we know. And we heard what he said after the game against the Avalanche about how, it was nice to be back, in the blue pads and all, but he really liked the competitiveness of the Four Nations face-off. For a guy like him, how much longer do you think he can stay here in St. Louis and be happy if he's not going to the playoffs? Because maybe for him, he feels like he's being underutilized. And that's a reality. And I hate to say that, right? Because to be on any hockey team in the National Hockey League is such an honor and such a privilege. But at the end of the day, if your team isn't making it to the playoffs and you're the star goalie, your Team Canada's goalie, and you're not on a playoff contending team season after season, I can sense the frustration. And while he hasn't said that he's frustrated, I can kind of read between the lines sometimes, right? And I think that with players like him that love that competitive nature, maybe it is a little defeating being on a team where you just don't have that opportunity. And I'm not saying that the Blues won't ever go back to the playoffs because that's always a possibility, right? Next season, who knows? But they're just such an average team that I can't say, well, maybe Dvorsky's going to help them. I don't know if even he's enough because, again, you have to think about defense. Juracek is years out. The problem with the Blues is that, yes, they do have, like, they're still in the system. They have good prospects and all, but it's going to take time for some of them to develop. Not everyone's going to have the Connor Bedard, Macklin Celebrini, Matvey Michkov type of player where they're ready immediately or they're ready like the following season. A lot of the times it takes 3 years, maybe a little bit more. It just depends. And I can sense just from what I hear him say in interviews, just when I'm hearing chatter around the NHL, that there might be a sense of frustration. And again, I don't know that. I'm just going based off of my observations. And I think for Binnington, I always said he deserves better. I think he deserves better from the national media. I think that people were really critical of Jordan Binnington for no reason. And I get what you're going to say. Oh, off the ice, he's made some comments and this and that. And he's not always the most welcoming person. I don't care. Okay. I don't care. I've talked to Jordan Binnington numerous times, and I can tell you he is one of the nicest people off the ice. Okay. He's great in the locker room, and he's a great goalie. And that's what matters when it becomes hockey talk is how are they as a player, not a person. Obviously, if someone's like a criminal or someone's a bad person, okay, different conversation, but he's not that. He may not be everyone's cup of tea, but I think that people and this is what bothers me, they characterize him and they judge him and they put him in this category as he's an awful person, but he's not, you know? And I think that when you just look at him and you look at his hockey talent and what he can do on the ice and how strong of a player he is, then you kind of tend to realize, oh, this is a valuable player. This is a player that has a lot of good assets about him. And he does. And he's always going to have that. I think that it's easy to immediately judge a player from things that you see off the ice. It's easy. People might do that with me. They might go on my social media and be like, oh my gosh, I don't like her. And that's okay. Like, I'm not asking you to like me, but you can still say in the same sentence, but she does know her hockey. Same thing with Binnington. You may not like him, but he's still a great goalie. And two things can be true. I like him. I don't have a problem with Binnington. I've never had a problem with him. I've always liked him and I've always appreciated what he's been able to do for my team to help us win a Stanley Cup. Yes, I know I'm not on the team, but it's still my team. And we won a cup not too long ago. So I'm always appreciative of that. So I think when it does come to the trade rumors, as much as it would be devastating to lose him, because it would be, I also would feel very confident within Joel Hofer. And I think that he's done a great job this season, and I really have enjoyed his play. I think it's not an easy conversation to have. And it's a conversation as we're nearing the trade deadline that we're going to have more of. I think that with how things are going in the NHL, we're hearing buzz again. We're hearing rumors circulate again about certain players. You can't say that trades aren't going to happen. Sooner or later, within the next couple of days, there's going to be a big trade that happens. It may not be with the Blues, but it will be around the National Hockey League. And then just like that's like a domino effect, and we're going to see more and more trades. And it just hit me. I believe the trade deadline is like 10 days away because February is weird. It only has like 29 days in it, which I personally don't like, but I'm also not going to get into that on the Locked On Blues podcast. But it's coming up soon. March 7th is quickly approaching. And I feel like with the Four Nations, it was a nice little distraction, right? We didn't have to think about the possibilities of trades. But now that that deadline is approaching, we're going to have that conversation of, wait, a trade might take place. And I think Jordan Binnington is safe, but I wouldn't be surprised either because, again, he is such a valuable player, one of the best goalies in the National Hockey League. And there's also the reality of he's not on a cup contending team. So for the Blues, do you just kind of wait for the team to get better and for him to kind of get out of his prime? That's the thing. It's a tough situation, but I also think at the same time, the playoff dreams are still alive for me. then let's talk about it. But first, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Blues here on YouTube at Locked On Blues, on our lovely Instagram at Locked On Blues, Twitter, Locked On Blues, TikTok, Locked On Blues. Did I miss anything? I don't think so. But no, here on Locked On Blues, as I said, it is daily Blues coverage, 5 days a week, sometimes more, because I just cannot stop talking about the Blues and I need to react. I do live stream sometimes on like social media, like TikTok, and on Twitter. I try to live tweet the games. Keyword try. Sometimes I get annoyed and I'm like, I don't want to like post anything that's going to get me in trouble with the bosses, so I kind of stay out of it. But it's a lot of fun here on Locked On Blues, and I do get exclusive coverage, as you heard Braden shed in my intro. So, anyways, let's talk about some playoff dreams. There is a part of me that thinks that the St. Louis Blues could still go to the playoffs. And I know what you're thinking, Hale. Come on. Be realistic. I know that it most likely won't happen. Yesterday's episode, we talked about how this is still a bottom 10 team. And do I think that they're going to be, this sneaky team that gets in? Probably not. But I realize for me to enjoy the rest of this season, I need to have some hope. And that's the key word. It's hope. I think that I get into a position sometimes where I tend to be really negative, and I don't want to be, but it's hard to be positive when your team is constantly letting you down, when your team is constantly hurting you and making you feel like, there's nothing good that's going to happen. And, I want to be positive. I do. And I want you to be positive here on Locked On Blues. I do. Because I do believe that this team has so much potential, possibility, and let's face it for how it is, opportunity. I think that we have watched the Blues struggle for too long of a time. We have. We watched the Blues struggle for years, right? Is it an excuse? No, it's not. It's just a reality. And sometimes for me, I feel like I'm in a position where I just get really frustrated and I don't necessarily know what to do all the time. And it's hard. It is. It's really hard because I love the Blues, right? I do. I love this team, I know you love this team. But sometimes when you think about the Blues and you think about, and I don't want to be harsh, but you just think about what they haven't been able to do. It does get you annoyed time to time. It gets me annoyed like all the time. So I don't know. I think that I just have a really difficult time sometimes just kind of separating that. But again, that's my own issue. I think that this team is good enough. I think that they are. I really do. I just think it's their own fault. And I don't know how they're going to get out of it. I don't know if they're going to get out of it. Because again, I think that this is up to St. Louis to decide, hey, we're going to actually really fight to go to the playoffs. But again, we'll see. All I know is that I'm kind of used to it at this point. So we shall see. All right, St. Louis. I will talk to you on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Blues. Until then, like always, let's go Blues.